So today we're going to dig into a tragedy that just completely shook the aviation world. I mean, we're talking about an incident that, when you first hear about it, seems absolutely impossible. This is the story of Air India Flight 171 and the really bizarre mystery of a simple switch. A switch that brought down a brand new jetliner. All right, let's get into it. You know, when you boil it all down, the heart of this entire investigation is just one single baffling action. Investigators have even given it a name. They call it the impossible switch. And it's called that because it's a move so against the rules, so fundamentally wrong, it's hard to wrap your head around. And that right there, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, how do the engines on a modern jetliner just turn off? We're not talking about some old plane here. This was a state-of-the-art Boeing 787 Dreamliner. You've got these two massive engines, right? They're packed with redundancies, safety protocols, the works. So how in the world is it possible that just moments after takeoff, both of them just went completely silent? Okay, so to really get what's going on, you've got to look at this one little component, the fuel control switch. Every single jet engine has one, and it's super simple, really. It's got two positions, run and cut off. When it's on run, fuel flows, the engine works, and you get thrust. You know, the plane goes forward. But when you flip it to cut off, that's it. The fuel supply is completely severed, and the engine just dies. Now here's the thing. A pilot is only supposed to touch that switch once the plane is safely parked at the gate. Never, and I mean ever, during takeoff. So to really drive home just how critical that little switch is, we need a rewind. We have to go back to the flight itself, to those frantic, absolutely terrifying final seconds over the city of Ahmedabad. The timeline here is it's shockingly fast. So it's June 12th, 2025. Air India Flight 171 lifts off the runway. Almost right away, the pilot gets on the radio with a mayday. But it's too late. Just 32 seconds after its wheels left the ground, the plane was down. A flight that was supposed to take hours was over in less than a minute. And this wasn't some short hop either. This was a long-haul flight, packed of people heading to London Gatwick. And the plane itself? A Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. Like we said, one of the most advanced, safest, and most efficient planes flying. So, on that flight, there were 242 people in total. That's 230 passengers and a crew of 12. And in the crash, just unbelievably, 241 of them died. But here's where the story takes a truly incredible turn. Amidst all that devastation, there was just one survivor. One person, a British Indian man named Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, was pulled from the wreckage alive, with what they said were only minor injuries. It's just staggering. And the tragedy, it didn't even end with the plane itself, because the aircraft didn't come down in an empty field. It fell into a dense residential area, and it hit a college hostel. On the ground, another 19 people lost their lives. So when you add it all up, that's 260 lives lost, all in the span of just 32 seconds. So of course, after a disaster of this scale, the first and only question on everyone's mind is why? And the search for answers began almost immediately with a massive global effort bringing together the world's top aviation experts. The investigation was led by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or the AAIB for short. But they definitely weren't working alone. Because the plane was made in the US and was flying to the UK, they were joined by a whole host of international agencies. You had the UK's AAIB, and from the US, you had both the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, and the FAA. And what they found, even in their very first report, was just chilling. And you have to pay attention to the exact wording here because it's so important. The report said the fuel control switches moved from run to cutoff. See, it doesn't say a person flipped them. It doesn't say why they moved, just that they moved. That careful, almost robotic language just makes the whole mystery even deeper, because with no power, the plane basically became a giant, heavy glider, and investigators had no immediate idea who or what was to blame. Well, as you can imagine, a finding like that puts absolutely everything under a microscope. We're talking not just the pilots, but the airline's entire way of doing things, and, of course, the manufacturer of the plane itself. And yeah, this is where the picture starts to get, well, a little messy. Because you've got these two conflicting stories. On one side, you have Air India saying, hey, this plane was perfectly maintained. It had a major check in 2023. The engines were serviced just months ago. But then, on the other side, in the weeks after the crash, India's own aviation regulator starts flagging Air India for a bunch of different violations. And this context is absolutely crucial. See, while Air India was pointing to the jet's recent service record, regulators were finding other stuff. Things like problems with how pilots were scheduled or overdue checks on emergency equipment. And then, sort of looming in the background, you have these older claims from Boeing whistleblowers about quality control on some Dreamliners. Now, let's be clear. Up until this point, the 787 had a perfect safety record. But all these little flags, they started to raise some pretty serious questions. You know, a crash like this, it's never just an isolated event. The loss of Flight 171 sent these immediate and really powerful shockwaves, these ripples, all the way through the entire aviation industry. And the stakes here were just huge. For more than a decade, the Dreamliner was held up as the symbol of modern aviation. It was innovative, it was safe. This was the first ever fatal accident involving a Boeing 787. So in an instant, that perfect record was just shattered. And that understandably raised huge concerns for airlines and for passengers all over the world. And the fallout wasn't just theoretical. You could see it in the numbers right away. In India, domestic air travel dropped by almost 3% in just the next month. Air India had to ground a bunch of its planes for inspections, and they lost a chunk of their market share. Meanwhile, their biggest competitor, Indigo, actually saw their share go up. It's pretty clear that people's confidence was really shaken. The government also moved really fast. Remembering what happened to that college hostel on the ground, they brought in new safety rules. The goal was to clear out obstructions, things like tall buildings and trees, from the areas right around airports. It was a direct response, an effort to make those supercritical takeoff and landing phases just that much safer. And that brings us right back to where we started. Back to that central, nagging mystery. How did those switches move? Was it a faulty piece of hardware? Was it a tragic, unbelievable human error in the cockpit? Or was it some kind of ghost in the machine? A software glitch in the plane's incredibly complex computer systems? The final report still isn't out, and so the world is still waiting for an answer. And it leaves everyone in aviation grappling with a really terrifying question. In our age of amazing technology, what happens when a simple switch creates an impossible problem?